Welcome back to the Marvel Movie Minute, a daily podcast in which we assemble to explore the films of the Marvel Cinematic Universe 1 minute at a time. In this, our 6th season, we are looking at the Avengers. I'm Andy Nelson from the Next Reel Film Podcast.
And I'm Pete Wright, and I only kneel when I'm tired.
Today we're talking about Minute 41, which begins with a staff pounding and ends with a lone voice. Joining us on the show today, we have Father David Mowry, chaplain of the Movies by Minutes community. Hello!
Pete and Andy, thanks so much for having me back. I'm just back from Stuttgart, and I got to tell you, the museums over there, they have these great holographic displays now. They're so lifelike.
So lifelike.
Are they life model decoys?
I love that you're here for this minute, and you get to actually listen to Loki quoting the Bible. I'm sure that's what he's quoting here.
Oh, Loki. There's a lot to say about Loki in this minute.
Oh, indeed. Before we jump into it specifically, I do just want to check in. So we're going to be talking about the next 3 minutes with you, and I wanted to know what specifically drew you to this part of the film to talk about.
I think in this part of the Avengers, you get a lot more about Loki's motivations. And I was torn between this scene and his dialogue with Thor just a couple minutes on from this, because you start to hear what's Loki in this for, not just in terms of seeing him as the puppet dancing on the end of Thanos' strings, but in terms of what he sees as his own legitimate motivations for this. And that opens up a really interesting philosophical discussion, because and I chose these minutes also because who doesn't love a good villain speech? This is just a really good villain speech in these minutes. And
it's a barn burner.
I tell you what, and you get a really great heroic moment, which we'll talk about later in this week, that I think speaks to something that the MCU got right and needed to get right in this movie for the rest of the MCU to work.
Wow. Well, it's going to be, there's plenty to talk about, as you said. This is a rich section of the film. So, but yes, as you brought up at the beginning, we are returning to Stuttgart, Germany. And Loki, this is kind of right after he's taken out the scientist inside. He extracted an eyeball, and now he's kind of herded everybody. We saw him in the last minute. He took out one police car. I don't know why the second police car never shows up, but it was there, and suddenly there's no police. I don't know. Anyway, he has now kind of herded everybody into this courtyard out in front of the of this building, this museum or opera house, whatever it is, and he is using several holograms of himself to kind of keep everybody in this center area as he gives this speech, and he demands everybody right at the beginning of this minute to kneel. And I guess let's first start talking about this whole idea of submission, particularly in Germany, as Loki's initial point of entry with this group. How does that play?
Well, I mean, the first thing I thought when I was listening to this was just how good the English education is over in Germany, that even in a high-stress situation like this, the people of Stuttgart are able to understand Loki through his Asgardian accent on top of speaking English.
I gotta say, I didn't question that once. Is that so foolish? I didn't even think I guess that's probably true. I think everybody does speak English very, very well. But I didn't cross my mind.
Well, that was my experience when I was in high school. We went on a tour of Austria and southern Germany, and we stopped in a high school in southern Germany and talked with the students there. And boy, they ran rings around me in terms of English. Even as a high school student, their pronunciation and diction and grammar was so much better than I had. I was so impressed. And I have nicht German in me whatsoever. I can't speak a single sentence of it.
It's funny. It actually reminds me, on the next reel, we talked about the Before trilogy, Richard Linklater's Before trilogy, and there's a scene in the first movie, Before Sunrise, when they're talking to a couple Viennese theater students, and the two characters come up to them and say, "Do you speak English?" And the Viennese guy's like, or no, actually they were German. I don't know. I think they were German students, and they said, "Yeah, but can you speak German for a change?" And I thought that was very funny because that's probably something that they all are saying inside, even if they're not saying
a very fair request,
right?
Yeah.
So funny.
But to your question, Andy, about submission, what comes to mind is there's a whole cultural history that we're going to delve into in these coming weeks. And what's interesting to me is that in terms of rhetorical strategy, this is a bad way to start. The use of fear and demanding people to kneel is usually a non-starter when you're working a crowd, because it's asking people to humiliate themselves. And what we've seen throughout history is that more often tyrants and those in power will create us versus them. Here we are on the inside. We're the ones who are going to rise up. We're all on the same side. And the people out there, they're the problem. We are gonna make them kneel. And we've seen that strategy play out over and over and over again. Loki being Asgardian and thinking himself a little bit better and smarter than everyone else, it takes the more direct approach. It kind of jumps a couple steps to having everyone submit to him right away.
Yeah, it's an interesting tact to take. The approach that he does. It's very direct and it's very menacing. It's not, and I guess. I don't know. I guess the way that he sees it is he doesn't, unlike, other dictators and people who have, acted this way over the course of history, they can't do it alone. They do need a team of people behind them to kind of like be able to kind of lead and get people to do this sort of thing. Loki does have he is an Asgardian. He is able to do a little more than, your run-of-the-mill dictator. And so,
and he has the Staff of Wonders.
And he has the Staff of Wonders. Maybe they're just all mesmerized by the staff.
You have to roll a D100 every time you use the Staff of Wonders.
That's exactly right.
And get a random effect.
Is there a savings throw against the Staff of Wonders?
Yeah, right.
It doesn't look like it.
Doesn't look like it.
But I do think that it was actually an interesting decision on the part of the filmmakers to choose to set this entire section of the film in Germany. It could have been just down the street in Brooklyn. It could have been in LA. I mean, it could have been all over many places of the world, but they very specifically chose, no, we're going to do this in Germany. And I feel like there is so much history with Germany. And obviously, I think this whole idea really brings up a lot of Hitler aspects. And we certainly are going to talk about that by the time we get to the end of this minute and the next couple minutes, because there's a lot going on as far as the decisions that they made to kind of paint the way that this particular figure chooses to speak to the people and tell them, what he thinks of them. And then, of course, the lone voice that stands up. I find it to be a very intriguing, a very intriguing take that is kind of a surprise in a film like this.
How much Midgardian history do you think is taught in Asgard? Like, do you think Loki is making this because he's an authoritarian at heart, or because he actually knows that he's in a contentious part of the world at a time in which this sort of menacing historical vibe is going to have extra resonance?
I think that'd be like asking someone in 17th century Europe if they've studied Aboriginal Australian history. I just don't think they would see it as worthwhile. Like, why would I need to bother learning the history of savages?
Yeah. I think that's actually a great response to that particular question, because it is one of those things that makes me think, okay, this is a filmmaker choice because it's going to resonate with the audience that knows more than the character delivering the speech ever would.
Mm-hmm.
And it's fine. I'm okay being manipulated that way. But in, again, The Curse of the MMM, right, the movie by minute process is, I'm aware of this in a way that I normally wouldn't be.
The other thing that occurs to me as we're talking about this scene, the two things that Clint asked for was a distraction and an eyeball. And we've checked the eyeball off the list. And I had to remember, right, this is the distraction.
This is the distraction.
Loki is just being really performatively evil. Now, he happens to be loving every minute of it, but this is a great big show meant to get a lot of attention. And so, yes, rhetorically, not a great way to win over the crowd, but that's not his point. He's doing something that works in the short term because that's his timetable for this. He's not starting a takeover of Stuttgart. He is just killing time and attracting attention to take any attention off of the iridium theft going on.
And in that regard, you kind of don't you have to imagine he didn't expect anybody to put up a fight because he's just there for the show. Had he known what he was doing, then maybe he would have chosen a different distraction.
Well, but at the same time, don't you think those are two things that they're doing, but there is kind of this third thing that they're doing, which is drawing the team out, right? And that's the whole idea that is going to kind of lead into eventually Loki getting captured and then Barton attacking the helicarrier. All of that is kind of part of a setup that I think that they've kind of been planning as far as a way to kind of put these puzzle pieces together so that they can and some of that I think I end up pulling more from there was that extended scene that we had of Barton and Loki talking down in Loki's lair, but it's still I think that that's largely still kind of part of the intent as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, totally get that.
And there's a little Xanatos Gambit going on here. Lots of pieces that have to fall just so for the plan to come together.
Yeah, right, exactly. I mean, if the Avengers hadn't picked up on the fact that Loki showed up, if their face trace wasn't working, and Loki just kind of where would things go if Loki ends up getting all these people to subjugate to him, and the Avengers never showed up? Would he say, "Okay, well, you know what?
All right, everyone, keep kneeling. Just keep kneeling. No, don't get up. Everyone, just keep."
No.
Any minute now, someone will stop me, I'm sure.
It'd be like the hayseeds in the bank in Raising Arizona. They'd be counting to 100 and finally screw this. They'd stand up and Loki would be pulling back up. Yeah, I do like that they chose Germany. I do think that it allows for a little more kind of a resonance of a scene like this. At the same time, to your point, Pete, it doesn't make a lot of sense as far as Loki having any sense as to why he would be doing any of this or what how other people would be interpreting this. It does end up feeling very much like a directorial choice to specifically do this. Although, I guess you could argue, you know what, Captain America spent some time in Germany. He's going to have some specific things to say about it. So maybe that's kind of a connection as well.
Yeah, that's another setup that again, that conversation Cap and Loki would have an extended conversation where Loki has no idea what he's talking about. I hear you, man, but why do I care?
Is that, that part of Loki's punishment? He has to sit there and take a history lesson from Cap. I was very insensitive what you did, and let me tell you why.
I know you were there.
Right. What do we had seen Loki playing around with his illusions of himself a number of times in Thor. He does it when he's on Jotunheim, as far as when they're fighting with the Frost Giants. He does it toward the end of the film when suddenly there's a whole bunch of Lokis all around Thor. In this particular case, he's got 3 other ones. A couple of them seem glitchy. I'm not exactly sure if that's intended or if there's some control issue that he's having as far as creating these. But does it work for you as far as kind of creating these 4 versions of himself to kind of hold everybody at bay as opposed to just the one?
Well, one of the weaknesses of this particular setup was everyone running out of the museum / opera house, whatever it is, and then turning around to look at the front door. The whole crowd just stops there because they hit their mark in the earlier scene, so that they're all already somewhat penned in to this little courtyard out in front of the building. To me, I think what the illusions are doing here are they're simply demonstrating that Loki is possessed of powers beyond human ken, and who knows what else he is capable of. And then directorially, they flicker a little bit just so that we know where the real Loki is, so that our attention is focused on Tom, who is acting. Although I did have a note when we have that scene where we just have the one illusion standing there. Like, is the director's note, just stand there and look menacing, Tom. We just need a couple beats of that to fill in these illusions.
Yeah.
Yes. And the problem I have with that is that there's the only reason you have an illusion that glitches is when the holographic projector is broken. There is no holographic projector to be broken in this sequence. We know which Loki is the real Loki because it's the one that's talking. And even if you can't track that, who cares? It's multiple Lokis, and that's awesome magics. Let's just let it happen. So I think it's weird and kind of dumb. And it's always stood out to me. Why do they need the holographic projector that does not exist to glitch? It's silly.
Yeah.
I notice it every time.
Are Loki's powers confidence-based like they are for Spider-Man? Like, because he's been shaken, he doesn't have good control over his magic, so he's just kind of doubting himself?
Are you saying we're about to introduce emo Loki in this sequence? Because that would be
Well, I think an argument can be made that he's always emo Loki.
He doesn't have bangs, though.
That is true. Oh, that would look so bad. Oh, all the hair and then it's just kind of down in front of his thank you.
The hiddle bang.
No. The hiddle bang. Oh, man. Because the other issue, like, when he strikes his staff on the ground, and this could just be the sound mix that I have as I listen to it in my through my headphones, but it sounds kind of like this staff resounds like across the entire courtyard. Like, are we hearing the staff of the holograms as well? Like, it almost sounds like it's coming from all sides. And so I don't know if that was intended because he's screaming kneel at everybody. But when he is specifically speaking to everybody, it's certainly like none of the other holograms are mimicking him. They're not like mirror images of him also doing what he's doing. They're just like standing guard, which I guess is kind of an interesting aspect that they're not just copies of himself. They're actually second versions of himself that he has just doing what he needs them to do.
So I can't tell. Are you making a case that maybe his like internal CPU is at capacity?
No,
like he can't project because they're all autonomous?
They're all autonomous, right?
You need to upgrade your GPU there, Loki. You're really pushing your hardware to the limit.
Yeah, because when he's doing it I'm trying to remember specifically in Thor when they're all surrounding Thor and Thor is fighting them, if they're all exactly doing the same thing or if some of them are acting autonomously as well. And I can't quite remember. And I know Thor finally, hits Mjolnir on the Bifrost, the Rainbow Bridge, and gets them all to disappear except for Loki. But I can't quite recall. Same thing on Jotunheim. I know I feel like the one who is talking, though, is the illusion as he's talking, or maybe, gosh, I can't remember now, but I feel like the illusion version of Loki was talking to the Frost Giant, but I could be wrong. Anyway, I guess that's kind of the confusing thing. Like, how does his magic work? And maybe it's the fact that he's creating so many of them. But then I want to go back to Thor. It's like, why were none of them on the Rainbow Bridge glitching?
My no prize answer for that is because he was on Asgard. And as we know, Asgardians are a little bit better when they're on Asgard. You can see, like, with Hela in Thor Ragnarok, she is more powerful on Asgard than she is elsewhere.
Sure. Okay. I buy that. And,
no prize inbound.
That's right.
Yes.
We're sending it in the mail right now.
Put it up on the wall.
And, I suppose that there's a case to be made, ever since he arrived on Earth, on Midgard, he has had kind of some moments of weakness. Like when he first gets here, he's kind of drenched in sweat. He can't hold himself up very well at the whole start of the film. And I wonder if there are particular points where carrying around the Mind Stone it kind of shows that it takes a little bit of a toll on him. And it's a very subtle thing, but I mean, perhaps that is something else that could be.
That was his Loki's fatigued conversation, Loki's sick conversation in the back of the pickup. I remember that now. That's many minutes ago.
But it was quite a while.
If I recall, I never quite felt like they sold that enough.
It's just they never really explained why.
Yeah.
And I think that was the biggest thing. It's like, was the trip through the through space and time? Was it exhausting? Like, I don't know.
No, I mean, you've heard of jet lag. Just wait for space lag. I tell you what, it's a bear.
I'm surprised all the Chitauri don't fall into New York City and take a nap.
That's why they have their little masks.
Right,
that's what helps with that.
They're all in their Airbnb condos. They'll check in at 4.
Those masks must serve a purpose. That's the only one I can think of.
Right. All right, so does it bother either of you that we have this group here in this courtyard? We had police pulling up. As I mentioned earlier, there were 2 cop cars that pulled up. The first one gets blasted and flips over. The second one kind of disappears. I don't know if the cop is in this crowd. I mean, who knows? We never see the cop, but that could be an answer. But is it weird that we never see anything else? Like, and even on some wide shots that we'll be getting later, it just seems like the rest of Stuttgart is just kind of going along, minding their own business as if nothing's going on here. Is it weird? Like, do we feel like we should be having sirens and things as this whole scene plays out?
Yeah. It kind of does. Like, it feels like I feel like as we approach this conversation, at what point would the police have been sent, right? Like, we knew things were kind of blowing up 2 minutes ago, right? Because in movie time, because they did the ocular extraction. Please check the merch store at marvelmovieminute.com for the new ocular extraction t-shirt. We knew that was already inbound. And so, but how long would it take would it take police longer to get there in mass? Mm-hmm. Like, you know what I mean?
They're already here.
Like, yeah, they got a couple that were just out on patrol. Like, maybe they were just kind of incidental cops.
Coming in with their sirens on, we hear them, and Loki sees them, and he blasts the first one. The second one should be calling in backup, like,
Yeah, but where's all I'm saying is, where's the backup? Stuttgart's a big place. Maybe it takes a little time.
The Quinjet flies across the Atlantic Ocean faster than the Stuttgart police can travel. It doesn't speak well for the Stuttgart cops.
With the Quinjet inbound, maybe S.H.I.E.L.D. has countermanded the police response in Stuttgart. Maybe they've told the Stuttgart forces to stand down.
Yes.
I love that you always have such a great answer. It's just perfect.
This is it. This is why you're here.
Marvel, I am available for your continuity purposes. Call me. It's happily manage your wiki.
There you go. Yeah, it is. I mean, I always do find it frustrating. And because of that, it always ends up feeling like more of a movie shoot, because it just feels like this is we're contained here. And, the civilians are going about their lives, but the film shoot's happening here. And so I don't know, as I always look at this, it just ends up feeling like it makes it kind of feel smaller, because it just, the rest of the world doesn't seem to be kind of tapping into this.
There is a weird scale problem that this movie has, because there's so much that happens either at S.H.I.E.L.D. facilities or at the end of the world, like we have in the Battle of New York. And there's nothing intermediate, and everything that happens in Stuttgart, feels very parochial. It's a crowd of about 100 people, give or take, maybe 200. And that's about it. All the rest of Stuttgart is empty. There's no other life to the city. There are no consequences to this beyond what happens here. And that's because the focus of the movie is on the interaction of the heroes. And so we need to keep the background players and the extras as simplified as possible until we have our great big fireworks display later in the movie. But as a result, the threat that Loki presents here, again, great villain speech, but there's not a big audience. Like, if he was using his holograph projections to re-echo this speech in every corner of the earth, like, oh, okay, wow, this is the big declaration of intent. This is pretty serious. This is like world level stakes now. But it's just a matter of one guy needing an eye patch and some people having a really terrible evening so far.
It's all about a ruined date night. That's really what happened.
These tickets were so expensive.
Yeah, but that's why I think it frustrates me, because, and it's not a big frustration, but it's something that I notice. I end up picking up on it as I watch the scene. It just ends up diminishing it because of that. And and to your point, I mean, media should also be showing up. I know media monitor the police channels, and if on that first call somebody would have shown up, hey, somebody just pulled a guy's eyeball out at the opera house. Let's go check it out. Like, there should be cameras showing up to film this. And then we could have that footage of Loki that would end up getting broadcast around. And so it is that sort of thing that to your point, does kind of make parts of this feel a little smaller and less heavy.
Yeah, like if they have footage, if S.H.I.E.L.D. has footage of Hawkeye and Black Widow in action in a war zone, from the omniscient cameraman, then surely they're going to have a camera, forgive my speech, eyes on Loki as he takes the guy's eye.
Boo. Oh, I'm just mad I didn't think of it.
Come on, you guys.
Oh, well, all right. Well, anyway, this speech is great. I mean, do we want to say anything specifically about anything in the speech, or should we jump toward the end when we meet our old German man?
I have a lot to say. It's all wrapped up in a Christ in the Cape little analysis, if we have time for that. So.
Oh, absolutely. Do you want to do that right now?
Oh, sure. Let's do that right now. So if you're listening to the first time to this Father David guy coming on to Marvel Movie Minute, I always bring a little Christ in the Cape segment where I look at these stories of superheroes through a Christian lens, because, of course, a story of a hero is a story about saving the day, and the central mystery of Christianity is around salvation. So in this speech by Loki, there's a little different tack I want to take, because what Loki gets into here is a very deep question about the relationship between freedom and authority that has played out, especially in the Western European tradition, for the last 200-300 years. I mean, first, just mad props to the writing in this, because this is Loki at his most Asgardian. He sounds like the brother of Thor. He says lines like, the bright lure of freedom diminishes your life's joy in a mad scramble for power. That's just chef's kiss. Such good writing. The logic behind it, though, is not new to the Avengers. This idea of the masses needing a strong hand, of someone needing to step in and a central authority figure, is not just a line repeated by every tin pot tyrant that comes along. There's a very strong representation of it in the Brothers Karamazov, where in the course of that book, two of the brothers, Ivan and Aloysia, are in a conversation. Ivan is the skeptic, more atheistic of the brothers. Aloysia is the more God-fearing, pure-hearted of the brothers. And Ivan is trying to show Aloysia the hypocrisy of religion. And so he tells them the story of the Grand Inquisitor, which is this marvelous story within a story. It's just Dostoevsky stunting on everybody else. The Grand Inquisitor is confronted with the return of Jesus to Earth. And the Grand Inquisitor locks Jesus up and interrogates him and says, look, Lord Jesus, we don't need you. We have all the authority wrapped up in the church, and you're going around giving people ideas about freedom. And really, you went about your mission all the wrong way. When you were out in the desert being tempted by Satan to turn stones into bread and throw yourself down from the pinnacle of the temple and let angels save you and to have all the nations gathered under your power, you should have taken those deals. You should have taken the devil up on his offers, because that would have been so much better for everyone else. They would have been fed. You would have asserted your godhood, and you would have assured peace. You would have assured salvation by ruling over all the kingdoms of the earth. And the Grand Inquisitor reveals that he and his fellow churchmen serve the devil in promoting the cause of the church, because the masses need a strong hand to rule over them. And so you can hear that in Loki's speech, that humans were made to be ruled. Now, the thing about a good villain is that a good villain is always a little bit right, but never all the way. They're wrong in very important ways. And looking at this as a Catholic priest, as one who disagrees with the Grand Inquisitor and with Loki, I would agree, though, that we're not made to be masters. And I think that is true, that we're made to be ruled by something, that is, we are meant to live according to something bigger than ourselves. But Loki is too small to fit that role. we're made to be ruled by a law of freedom, a law in which all can be who we were made to be. And so therefore, it can't be a law imposed by force and fear. I don't need a man in a silly golden helmet yelling at me to kneel in order to be fully myself. What I need is an invitation out of love and nonviolence to step into a wider horizon, something beyond what I can imagine. And that's what I like about our elder standing at the end of this minute. We are made to kneel. He says, not to men like you. And I love that distinction. He doesn't disagree with Loki's central premise. He disagrees with to whom the obedience is owed. It's possible to submit to earthly authority, but only if it's just. But there's also not to men like you, and in that I hear a reference to all of humanity. And it's possible, therefore, to submit to a divine authority, and not a small, puny god like Loki, but a God that truly invites through love and nonviolence into a law of freedom that fulfills and brings to perfection all the longings of our hearts and everything we have and are. And so that lure of freedom is authentic, but it doesn't diminish life's joy, because when we're scrambling for power, that's when we've gone wrong, because we don't need power to ensure our freedom. What we do need is that actual humility to recognize that God is God and I am not. And in that act of humility, in that act of submission, of kneeling, if you like, then we find that the lure of freedom is not a false promise, but a true one.
I find it so fascinating that you bring up, Russian literature. It seems like the Russians get it. Like Bulgakov and Chekhov and Gorky, like they all write about the hypocrisy that comes from subjugation and the quest for power. And I absolutely adore that. And that's the piece that I think is so great about this minute, and the way it was cut, the way it fell in time, that we get a statement and a response, and both men are speaking truth. It's not Loki in gamesmanship. He's not lying either. Like his perspective is, this is Midgard's journey, is to kneel. And as you say, like, there are a lot of interpretations that say, yes, this is what humanity is designed to do. This is what following is designed to yield. And I think it's fascinating.
It certainly ends up becoming an element within the continuation of these stories in this franchise, as Alexander Pierce kind of has this same interpretation. You are made to be ruled, and we're going to, have all these helicarriers hovering over everybody, just making sure that we're always ready to take you out if you're being a problem. And this idea that and you could almost, and I know there's this whole Shield Hydra sort of thing, but still, even with the World Security Council, there is kind of this idea of the way that rulers are ruling. And, I don't know. I find it to be an interesting setup for this story and kind of the continuation of where we're going to be going.
This is yet another data point in the Avengers' journey toward fascism, right? And we've talked about this before on the show in other minutes, like these data points where in the quest to do good, we end up doing something evil. And that's a wonderful sort of contrast.
Yeah, might lead to a civil war one of these days.
Well, I don't know, Andy. We have a lot of minutes between now and then.
Let's take this one Stuttgart minute at a time, okay?
That's right. Now, I have a question for you both. So, as our German man, and I'm going to play the IMDb game with you both here in a sec with our German old man, played by Kenneth Tigar, or Tigar.
Yes.
But the music shifts to a solo violin as as the camera lands on him before he kind of stands. Is that too on the nose? Are we suddenly like jumping into like Schindler's List territory by just like now we've got like this solo violin playing with him? Or does it work for you?
Was the string quartet too much when Loki was sweeping down the stairs in the opera house? Because if that was not too much, then this is not too much. I mean, it's a comic book movie. We can have really on-the-nose music cues. I'm just grateful that it's not a needle drop. It's not something like our quote from Fiddler on the Roof or anything like that. That would be a little much.
That would be too much. Yeah, I'm okay with this little bit of manipulation myself.
Yeah, no, it's fine. I do like it. I'm just being a little cheeky, but it does strike me as kind of funny, and I just imagine the director going to Alan Silvestri, it'd be really nice here. What if a little violin kicks in? Like, it just makes me laugh when I think about that, because it probably happened.
Yeah.
All right. Kenneth Tigar, our German old man. He is a face that you surely have seen in a lot of things, because he has 176 credits, a lot of TV, a lot of movies. Can either of you place him in anything else that you might say is on his IMDb known for?
The Avengers. I'm going to say the Avengers.
Okay.
Rats. Beat me to it.
And I have one more. Where he is a very familiar, as you say, he is a face for sure.
Yes.
He is a character in a show that I happen to have watched fairly recently. I was late to the party, and it's on Amazon Prime. And I'll say it, but I don't want to give it up if David knows it.
I'm coming up empty. I would hazard to guess a genre. I would guess that he has been in something Holocaust related, given his background and general demeanor. He would seem to fit into that kind of heavy human drama of that time period.
Well, it would be. It's amusing that you say that. He was in The Man in the High Castle.
Aha!
Right.
He played Himmler in High Castle.
Oh,
so.
All right.
Yeah, that's the only other one I have. I'm sure he's the way I see him, he's like the disgruntled chief of police. He's like, grr, I'm really angry all the time, and you'll see me in occasional transition scenes.
He has that sort of face where he plays somebody in the police or a medical profession or a legal profession. Like, he ends up in a lot of those sorts of roles because of his look. And to your point, the Avengers obviously is in here, but his background, he's actually an American actor born in Massachusetts. He's been acting for a very long time, since the 1970. He appeared in his first TV show, but his four known fors, I'll just tell you: The Avengers, you got that one. Lethal Weapon 3, where he plays Jarvis Becker from the Bomb Squad.
Was that the one with the toilet scene? Was he like standing outside what's his name's house as his legs fell asleep while he was on the toilet?
He's in that scene. That's Lethal Weapon 2, though. But he's in both of the movies. He's in both of them as the same character, but Lethal Weapon 3 is the one that's on his known for.
Okay.
Also, Creator from 1985. I never saw this, but I know I saw the cover of it because it was Peter O'Toole trying to, I think the story was he's trying to clone his dead wife, played by Mariel Hemingway. So that's
classic story.
Yeah, of course. Of course. Last but not least, it was 1997's Conspiracy Theory with Mel Gibson, Julia Roberts, and Patrick Stewart. So
okay, I would not have picked that ever in a million billion years. And I guess I know the error of my ways that The Man in the High Castle was too recent for known for.
Probably, even though I think it ended in 2019, right? So it's not that new. So, but anyway, to your points, though, a lot of the roles that he was in involve kind of those professions where it's like, he's wearing a suit and tie or involved with the police or something like that. So. But, and interestingly, he's American, but it says in his trivia that he speaks German fluently with a perfect accent. Hence, probably why they chose to cast him for this part.
Awesome.
So that's Kenneth Tigar. And, but yeah, so he's going to stand up here and have this conversation. We've already talked a little bit about the "not to men like you" line that we get right at the end of this minute. There's going to be a great conversation between him and Loki in the next minute. So let's save that for next time. We'll come back in minute 42 and continue the conversation. So with that, Father David, where can people learn about you and all the stuff that you're the podcast you're guesting on and everything else you're up to in this big wide world.
You can find everything that I do in one convenient place at FatherDavidMowry.com. That's FATHER David MOWRY.com. I have a page there that links to all the various podcast appearances that I've been on. There have been so many that if you go to the website, it may be under construction. Pardon our dust. I've been a little behind in adding some minutes, but I'm sure these minutes will be on there in very short order.
Fantastic. Well, we certainly appreciate it. We'll have the links in the show notes, everybody, so you can check those out. We'll be back tomorrow to talk about Minute 42. So, Pete, thanks as always.
Okay, maybe I won't kneel, but can I sit?
Until next time, true believers.
Marvel Movie Minute is a production of True Story FM, engineering by Andy Nelson. This season's music is Message to the World by Anthony Vega, and this season's show art is by Winston Yabo. Find the show at truestory.fm. If your podcast app allows ratings and reviews, please consider doing that for our show.